Now, many Christians, when they hear this word predestined, they get all worked up about the word predestined or the word predestination. And for many Christians, when they hear the word predestination or predestined, they immediately think, well, what about free will? What about human responsibility? And they shift the focus to something God is not even talking about. You know, if you and I were having a conversation and I was sharing with you about a vacation to Florida and telling you about all the wonderful things that we did in Florida and where we went, where we stayed, and where we ate while we were in Florida, and you responded by saying, well, what about New York? Well, what about New York? I'm not talking about New York. I'm talking about Florida. Yeah, but you should talk about New York too. I didn't go to New York. I went to Florida. Yeah, but you should still talk about people that go to New York. I didn't go to New York. Yeah, but you should still talk about it. Well, I should talk to somebody else. I don't want to talk to you about my trip to Florida anymore. Well, this is kind of how many Christians respond when they hear predestination. Well, what about free will? What about human responsibility? You got to talk about that too. He's not talking about free will. He's talking about predestination. Free will is not the topic. Predestination is. Don't divert your attention away from what God is saying in the passage, because then you miss the blessing of what God is saying here. And free will becomes a red herring in the conversation. The word predestined, by the way, the word predestined, listen to this. The word predestined only appears 4 times in the Bible. Again, we make a big deal out of it. It only appears 4 times in the Bible. 2 of the 4 times are right here in Romans chapter 8, verses 29 and 30. So half of everything the Bible has to say about predestination is right here in Romans chapter 8. 2 of the 4 verses. The other 2 verses, in case you're taking notes, Ephesians chapter 1, verse 5, and Ephesians chapter 1, verse 11. And every time the word predestined is used in the Bible, which again, it's only 4 times, so we're not talking about many, but every time the word predestined is used in the Bible, it is speaking of believers. It never is used for non-believers. Nowhere does it say non-believers are predestined. It's always speaking of the predestination of believers. And what has God predestined believers to? Well, look at what it says. God has predestined believers to be conformed to the image of His Son. That's what predestination is about. It's about believers being conformed to the image of His Son. We've been predestined to be conformed into the image of Jesus. God decided in advance, before we were even born, that God wanted to make us like Jesus. And when exactly did God predestine us to be like Jesus? Well, if you're taking notes, Ephesians chapter 1, verse 4 says it was before the foundation of the world. Before the foundation of the world. So we're going back to before Genesis 1:1, before God created the heavens and the earth, He predestined us to be like Jesus. In Ephesians chapter 1, verse 4, again it says, just as He chose us in Him before the foundation of the world, that we should be holy and without blame before Him in love, having predestined us to adoption as sons by Jesus Christ to Himself, according to the good pleasure of His will. Before God created the world, before God created the heavens and the earth, He knew that He would create us, and He knew that He would make us like His Son, Jesus Christ. That was His plan. From before the foundation of the world, that was His plan for you and for me as believers in Jesus Christ. And here's the crazy thing in my mind. We had no idea. We had no idea that God had this plan for us from eternity past. I mean, especially if you became a believer, as a young adult or in your teens or in adulthood, you had no idea God had a plan for your life From before the time he created the heavens and the earth, you had no idea he had a plan to call you and save you and make you like Jesus Christ. And he had this plan before he even laid the foundation of this world. I think of what David writes in the Psalms, in Psalm 139, verse 16. There David says, "Your eyes saw my substance, being yet unformed, and in your book they were all written, the days fashioned for me, when as yet there was none of them." David says, "You saw me before I was born. Every day of my life was recorded in your book. Every moment was laid out before a single day had passed." And as I said, we were completely unaware that God had this plan, that God had this purpose for us until we became a Christian and the Holy Spirit opened our eyes and we began reading the Bible and we realized this was God's plan for me all along, since before the foundation of the world. This was his predetermined plan for me, and I'm just now realizing it. I'm just now, my eyes are just now open to this. And here I thought, I found Jesus. Right? When you get saved, I found Jesus. What happened to you? I found Jesus. Remember when I became a believer, there was a really popular worship song called "I Found Jesus." I loved that song. That's right, Lord, I found you. No, not really. He's had this plan for me since before the foundation of the world. I'm just catching up to the story here in my 20s. But he's had this plan for me since before the foundation of the world, that he was going to conform me into the image of his Son. And this is his purpose for every believer. His purpose for every believer is to conform us into the image of his Son and to make us like Jesus Christ. Now, not just when we get to heaven. That's when he's going to finish this work. But he wants to do that now in our lives. He wants to make us like Jesus now. Again, we're not just waiting for heaven to come. Now that we're saved, now we're just waiting. No, he wants to do a work in our lives now to conform us into the image of Jesus and make us like Jesus Christ now.